Welcome to the Messianic Assembly program. I want to have a brief program about, was the Apostle Paul a present-day Christian? Most of the Christianity today has nothing to do with the book of Acts. Most of Christianity today strips away most of the Bible. It strips away the Torah law and the prophets. And they give lip service to it, but they don't obey the word of God. Paul always kept the Sabbath. Apostle Paul always instructed to keep the feast. The Apostle Paul believed all of the law. The Apostle Paul taught from the law. The Apostle Paul continued to live as a Pharisee. You read in Acts 23, verse 4, verse 6, he says, "Brothers, I myself am a parush," P-A-R-U-S-H. That means a separate one, a set apart. That's what Pharisee means. And he said, "I'm the son of a Pharisee." So he said, concerning the hope of the resurrection from the dead, I'm being tried. So Apostle Paul continued to live as a Pharisee. This is in the 23rd chapter, way over in Paul's ministry. Paul was converted in Acts chapter 9. And this was 10, 20 years later. He's still living as a Pharisee, living and keeping the law of God. We read in verse chapter 17, it was his practice chapter 17 and 18, it was his practice to go to the synagogue and preach. It said, according to his usual practice, Shaul went in, and on 3 Shabbats he gave them drashes from the Tanakh. He preached the word of God here in 3 consecutive Sabbaths. He kept the Sabbath. Chapter 18, verse 4, Saul began to carry on discussions every Shabbat in the synagogue, where he tried to convince both Jews and Greeks. He kept the Shabbat. 85 times you read in the book of Acts alone. The believers, the true believers, continued to worship God and keep the Shabbat. They didn't strip out the Bible and become Catholics like the people are today and worship exclusively on Sunday morning. That's it's celebrating the sun god. That's Roman Catholic stuff that we don't have time to get into. The Apostle Paul continued to believe the word of God. He told the people in the book of Acts to believe the word of God. He told the people in Corinth, chapter 5, the Corinthians, who are not my favorite bunch because, yeah, they were saved, but they were full of paganism, full of all kinds of sexual perversion and horrible things that these people in Corinth did. How they were actually still saved, I don't know. But he says here in chapter 5, he said, so get rid of the old hamats so that you can be a new batch of dough, because in reality you are unleavened. For our Pesach lamb, the Messiah, has been sacrificed, so let us celebrate the Seder not with leftover hamats, the hamats of wickedness and evil, but with the hamats of purity and truth. The Apostle Paul told people, look, keep the Passover, strip away the unleavened from your lives as well as from the bread, and keeping everything like you're supposed to do. So I'll get into a longer program here later on YouTube, on the YouTube channel, Messianic Jewish Assembly. But I'm just upset about this, that I see so many Christians deceived. They don't know that they're supposed to keep the word of God, all of it. So realize the Apostle Paul, he is the darling of the Christians. He continued to live a set-apart life. As a Pharisee, he continued to obey the Torah and the prophets and practice Leviticus 23, the 7 feasts and festivals. He also continued to keep the food laws and all of the Word of God. So God bless you till next time.